We might need some extra allotted time here because the number 2 post-spring SEC power ranking team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that might shock some people, but Alabama has made quite a big jump. It's well documented that they didn't lose a single transfer in the spring portal, which I put them out to Lance is impressive, but I think the more impressive number is last year. Obviously, they lost a ton of guys in spring because of Nick Saban leaving, but they lost 40 overall transfers last year. And obviously, they still lost some guys in December this year, but that number was only 24. So to have, a minus 16, on year to year, that's a huge jump in my mind in the portal era. Obviously, big stories at quarterback where it's an ongoing competition, but it seems to be Ty Simpson is the leader in the clubhouse. Ryan Grubb said, if they played a game tomorrow, he would be the starter. And he's going to have a solid wide receiver core led by Ryan Williams to throw to. You and I both talked, obviously, running back might be, a little bit of a question mark for them, but we both think that Richard Young should be seeing plenty of carries at running back this year alongside Jam Miller. Little worried about the offensive line after, past couple of years of being told that it's the greatest offensive line known to man. But a little worried about, especially that right side with Wilcom Formby over there. I mean, in the limited time we saw him, wasn't impressive. Obviously, a year, to develop and stuff. I think
he played. He played a little bit at the end of the year last year and was significantly better than he was earlier in the year. What you expect with a young offensive tackle trying to block SEC edge rushers.
Yeah.
But he got better as the year went on last year, and they said that he's looked solid so far this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm going to let you talk about it, but man, this defense is absolutely loaded. Even though they lost guys like Tim Smith to my Indianapolis Colts, they're loaded. I mean, like you said, like we talked about last night, so loaded that a guy like Jalen Mbakwe is going from the defense to the offense to join that wide receiver core. And obviously, we talked about Ryan Williams, but getting Isaiah Horton over to transfer in. I mean, they got recently a couple tight ends in the spring portal. So they definitely are one of the teams that have made a pretty decent jump from kind of being in the mid-teens of these way too early rankings and kind of jumping inside the top 10 in a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, the guys that we respect a lot, Andy and Ari over at On3, Andy Staples released his post-spring top 25 for the entire country here recently, and he talked about that the team that made the biggest jump for him from before the spring ball to post-spring was Alabama. And for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned, he said that he really did a double take of Alabama's roster, and he was just taken back by how loaded that it truly is, especially on the first string on both sides of the ball. And you asked me about the defense a second ago. Yeah, it is. It's the most talented defense as far as overall returning production that Alabama has had. I know it's a mouthful because they've had some really good ones, but
I think you made the distinction last night when we were talking. Overall, it's the most talented defense, but like you said, they don't have a lot of name guys that are going to probably go in the first round, like kind of top 10 picks like Minkah and those guys, but just a solid bunch of ball players.
Yeah, the star power at the top, like a Will Anderson, for example, or a Dallas Turner, or like you mentioned, Minkah Fitzpatrick or Pat Surtain. Those guys aren't there, but there are extremely solid players across the board, like top 3 round type players like LT Overton that coming back off the edge. But so Alabama returns their best defensive linemen across the board, all 4 across the board. They're really too deep on their defensive line. Quay Rusall was a young guy last year that was Alabama's best edge rusher earlier in the year, and then he ended up getting hurt. He's back from injury. LT Overton ended up being their best defensive lineman last year. He's back as well. He came back. He could have went pro. He came back. And then in the secondary, everybody's back. Literally all of them. Damani Jackson could have went pro. He ended up coming back. Xavier Brown, who was a true freshman last year at the other corner, who made the great play at the very end of the game on the last play of the game against Georgia, knocked the ball down when they tried to throw a touchdown to win the game against Alabama at the end. He started all year last year as a true freshman, was the top corner in the country coming out of high school last year before going into the year. He's back at corner. Your boy, Bray Hubbard, who ended up getting a lot of playing time last year because Keon Sabb, who at the time was Alabama's most productive defensive back in Keon Sabb, he gets hurt. And then in steps Bray Hubbard, who at one point last year, you said, dude, is Bray Hubbard the best player on Alabama's defense?
Yeah.
Like how productive that he was and just solid as a rock. And now he is one of the team leaders. Keon Sabb's back from injury now. So all four of those guys
Yeah, they
are
took their
back.
licks last year.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. All four of those guys are back. And then they've got about 6 or 7 deep in the secondary that Alabama feels extremely good about that could be starting at any point. Cam Calhoun was a big-time transfer starter at Utah for Kyle Whittingham's Utah squad. They brought him in at corner. So I firmly believe this. I think Alabama has the best secondary in the country going into the season as of right now, post-spring ball.
Yeah, I said it last year too, man. Like, and I'll keep saying it. Last year was your chance to get Alabama, and that first year, that changeover from Saban to DeBoer. Obviously, you know, a lot hinges on the quarterback play, as it does with every single team in the country. So,
Yep.
Can they get a quarterback to perform? That's basically the question.
Yeah, I mean they're obviously Greg McElroy talked about this publicly here recently. I know a lot of you don't just sit around and listen to Alabama sports talk. That's fine. I understand, obviously. But the most talented thrower of the football on Alabama's team for the last 3 years has been Ty Simpson. Previous 2 years has been Ty Simpson. He just struggled with making mistakes and being able to move on from those mistakes. Not winning the locker room from a leadership perspective. A lot of those things have changed. He now has a offensive-minded, QB-friendly type head coach with a really good offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb. I expect the growth for Simpson to be pretty substantial. But again, you just said it. The defense and all of the playmakers around him on offense are going to be as good as what Alabama's had in a while. The receiver position and the DB position for Alabama is as deep as you could want for a team. It's can Simpson progress and be the answer for Alabama at the quarterback position? If he is, again, Alabama is one of those few teams that we're going to talk about across and through our power rankings in each conference that has a chance to compete at the national championship level again this year.
Yeah,
Alabama
I mean,
has the roster to be able to do that.
I think they're going to want him to make some plays, but honestly, like you said, the defense, the wide receivers, get your playmakers the ball and don't make mistakes. I mean, it's going to be. You don't need to chuck it and have big shots down the field like Milroe had to do last year a lot. I mean, you just, dink and dunk even. Just take care of the ball.
Yep, take care of the football. Let your defense, who's going to be really good. It's every possession, inning, and a kick is what you want, obviously. Don't turn the football over. Don't have the catastrophic turnovers that Milroe had against Oklahoma and against Vandy, those pick sixes or sack fumbles that turn into touchdowns. Those are just catastrophic type turnovers. But you mentioned the offensive line. I mean, the question marks on each side of the ball. The question marks for Alabama is going to be at left guard and right tackle. How do those guys end up meshing with really good, talented players like Caden Proctor at left tackle and Parker Brailsford at center and Jaden Roberts at right guard? All three of those guys are really good, and they're listed by whatever you think of PFF. They had all three of those guys listed at top 10 players at their respective positions going into this year. And on defense, it's inside linebacker. Losing Jihad Campbell, who was so good for Alabama this past year. He goes to the Eagles in the first round. And Deontay Lawson had a nasty knee injury against Oklahoma later in the year last year. Lawson has been one of the top tacklers for Alabama 2 or 3 years in a row. What does he look like coming back health-wise? They're going to need him to be the quarterback of that defense, to be that green dot linebacker that's calling in the plays from Kane Womack, and be the leader of that defense. Hopefully he can be that. They brought in a solid transfer, Nakai Hill-Green from Colorado, middle linebacker. I know initially it's like, I don't know if I want a whole lot of defenders from Colorado coming in. But the previous year, Damani Jackson was the same way. He comes in from USC. USC was flat out cheeks on defense the year before. Damani Jackson was super talented, comes over at corner, was solid as a rock for Bama all year long at his corner position. Nakai Hill-Green was one that started at Michigan back in 2022. Started every game for Michigan back in 2022. He ended up transferring eventually, played at Colorado last year, was Colorado's second leading tackler. So But still, Alabama's defense, they need Deontay Lawson to be healthy to be what I think they possibly can be on defense. And if they want to get back to competing at a national championship level, they just need Ty Simpson to be solid. They don't need him to be Heisman Trophy Bryce Young. They don't need him to be what Tua was. They just need him to manage the game, don't turn the football over, and let those playmakers that you have in that defense work.